They asked me, Blake, do you think you can build a customer-centric culture by bringing that to your front line? And I said, no, absolutely not. Because let's be real, customer experience, if you're making your customers a priority, it does take resources. It can take money. But you can't expect your frontline workers to just bring the energy and the smiles to your customers if they're overworked and the company's not managed well. There's so many pieces of customer experience, but one of the big things is leadership, management, reducing back-end complexity. Like your frontline's going to do that? No. And so it really is a leadership conversation.
Helping you create loyal customers and loyal employees, all through the power of simplicity. This is the Simple Brand Podcast, now heard around the world, including Matosinhos, Portugal. I'm your host, Matt Lyles, and this week I'm talking with the Queen of CX, Blake Morgan. Blake is a customer experience futurist. She's one of the world's top keynote speakers. She's host of the Modern Customer Podcast, where she interviews senior executives from some of the world's most customer-centric companies. And Blake's the author of 3 books on customer experience, including her latest, The 8 Laws of Customer-Focused Leadership, the new rules for building a business around today's customer. Now, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but I've heard from countless people who talk about how their leaders will talk about the need to be customer-focused. But when it comes down to it, the leaders themselves don't actually act like they're customer-focused. Their decisions, their actions, the way they talk about customers, and even other departments, showcase a leader who is more focused on themselves than on the customer. So whatever they say about being customer-focused really falls on deaf ears. Now, I don't know if you know this, but if you're a leader, your people are actually paying more attention to what you do than what you say. Like the saying goes, more is caught than taught. Your people aren't going to act based on what you tell them. Your people are going to act based on the behavior that you model to them. So if you want your people to be customer-focused, then you have to model customer-focused behavior, customer-focused decisions, customer-focused actions to your people all day, every day. Thankfully, Blake has a solid blueprint to give you on how to do just that through her 8 laws of customer-focused leadership, and we talk all about them. But here's something else that happened in our discussion that I'm really super excited about. We actually delved into an area that I don't normally discuss with guests. Blake and I talked about how having a customer-focused mindset and customer-focused habits can actually make you a better spouse and a better parent. That's just another proof point that the best customer experience leaders don't just relegate customer experience to their business, they make customer experience their lifestyle. So here it is. Here's my interview with Blake Morgan. Hey, Blake. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, I am excited that you're finally here. I'm excited because you've got a new book coming out. This is your 3rd book, right?
My 3rd book. I've been doing this so long. It's kind of scary when you start to talk about your career. You know, when you start out, everyone says, you're so young. And then people just stop saying that. You're like, you're just as old as everyone else. I started doing this like almost 20 years ago when I was 21. And now I just turned 40 like last week. And
happy birthday.
Thank you. And I've been lucky enough to be immersed in this world for so long. So yes, 3rd book, really excited. Feel like my content has been growing up alongside me. And I really feel like this book is relevant because it's a leadership book. And you and I know that if you want to affect change with customer experience, it really has to start with the leaders. There's not many books on leadership and customer experience. So I'm really excited to bring this content to the world.
Yeah, so I totally understand that because you may have some customer experience advocates in your organization, but if it's not coming from the top down, it is an uphill battle trying to focus on customer experience. It has to come from leadership.
Absolutely. And I'll remember very clearly, I was at a telecom company in Dallas and I was presenting to the leaders to a small group, a workshop. And they asked me, Blake, do you think you can build a customer-centric culture by bringing that to your front line? And I said, no, absolutely not. Because let's be real, customer experience, if you're making your customers a priority, it does take resources. It can take money. But you can't expect your frontline workers to just bring the energy and the smiles to your customers if they're overworked and the company's not managed well. There's so many pieces of customer experience, but one of the big things is leadership, management, reducing back-end complexity. Like your frontline's going to do that? No. And so it really is a leadership conversation. Ideally, the CEO is the big change agent and advocate, because then you can bet that everybody's gathering around and saying, we're going to do this and it's sustained. But to expect your middle management or frontline to change a company, it's just not realistic.
Not at all. I can see where frontline middle management, they'll want to have a customer-focused approach, and they may be really gung-ho about it for a period of time. But if the culture, if the infrastructure, if the processes, the policies, the procedures hinder them, they're going to get burnt out. And after a while, just be like, you know what? I can't do that anymore, and just go back to their old ways.
Before we turned the record button on, you and I were talking about being parents. And I was sharing, I love talking about parenting, but it's kind of like being a parent. If you don't set your kids up for success, if you don't create the structure and put them in the right place at the right time for the right opportunities, invest in them, develop them. For me, tough love. I'm a fan of the tough love strategy, discipline, all these things. That is an investment in the culture of your family, which in a way, it's like running a small business with your partner. So hopefully we'll talk more about the parallels between parenting and customer experience mindset. But we were chatting that I believe customer experience mindset is so much more than just customer experience. It's really a way of life and an outlook on life. It's a lifestyle.
I think so. If you get to that point where you're hiring people and you're looking for employees that you want to have a customer-focused mindset, to me, in that recruiting process, in that interview process, it really helps to look for people that already have that customer experience mindset, that customer experience approach with everything in their life.
Yeah. So when I first hired my assistant, she made quite a few mistakes, but it's normal. I mean, when you hire someone, you have to train them, you have to invest in them. But what I'm always looking for in the people that work for me is that attitude of, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to do better. I recently had an issue where I took my son to the pharmacy because he had an ear infection, as little kids are wont to have. Ear infections all the time. And they give you this medicine that is a powder, and then they have to mix it with a special water for the ear infection. So I took the medicine home. I was about to give it to him. I realized they never did the mixing part. This is at a major pharmacy with a big successful brand. And I was so upset. And I called the pharmacy and I said, hey, you didn't do the second step of mixing the medicine. And now I have to bring my sick son back to the pharmacy. And he kind of started arguing with me. It's funny, people like you and me, we get into these customer experience and customer service nightmares. I mean, we're just like everyone else. And I said to him, all I really wanted to hear was for you to say sorry. And I was thinking about this as I was driving today. When something goes wrong, you literally train employees. All you say is, I'm sorry. Take accountability, and not the litany of excuses, because that is the only thing to say in that moment. And so even on my team, I'm looking for those old school, I'm sorry, I'm going to do better. Almost like a military mindset. Yeah. Because that's all you really want to hear. And so my assistant has been with me a year now and she's great, but it was rough starting out and she had to be trained and she made mistakes. But again, that attitude of learning, of growth, of humility, of, oh gosh, I made a boo-boo and I'm going to do better next time.
That's it. What I've coached employees before too is, yes, start with, I'm sorry. Start with the apology and then follow up with, and here's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
It's recognizing that you've been at fault and apologizing for it, but then taking that ownership with the next steps.
Yes. And I saw you were at FedEx for a really long time, which is such a great brand, really one of the
Gosh,
more customer-centric brands in the world.
I had a number of dream job roles there. I had so much
Mhm.
fun, but I'm curious how you define customer centricity, how you define a customer centric experience.
I heard it defined recently. I got to speak at a conference for the restaurant industry, and the other keynote, who I didn't get to see his speech, but it was Danny Mayer of Shake Shack. And
Yeah.
he had this really interesting position on customer experience, this idea of hospitality, which is that you're either for me or you're against me. And it was so simple, but distilled down. I mean, really, that is customer experience. As a customer, do I feel like you want to be here with me, or am I just a pain in your rear? Am I in your way? And it really is that simple. It's when the person that's serving you makes you feel, or maybe it's a digital customer experience that you're on that journey as a customer. But do
Right.
I feel the company has really gone out of their way to make me feel welcome, like they want me here, or are they just trying to
Yeah.
get rid of me as fast as possible? The restaurant can be a microcosm for the whole world. It's like, how do I treat you when you come in? And actually, the word restaurant comes from the French, and I don't speak French, but restaurar, which is literally
Yeah.
like a place to rest and to feel rejuvenated and restored. The word restored.
Oh,
So I
wow.
actually love learning about the restaurant industry and hospitality because it is such a microcosm of the whole world and of customer experience in general. This show is about keeping it simple. I'll keep it
Yeah.
simple for your audience. It's a vibe.
Thank you.
It's how do you make people feel? How do you make your employees
Yep.
feel? How do you make your customers feel? Do your employees have a smile in their voice or not? Customer can
Yeah.
tell whether that's on the phone or not. So that's it. It's just a vibe, but what goes into making that vibe is kind of complicated.
It is, yes. Of course, I preach simplicity and I preach that a simple experience is the best experience, but a lot has to go into making it simple. If you think about the restaurant industry, it's not just on the server to be the one to deliver that experience. It's every single team member, every employee of that restaurant plays a role in helping that customer, helping that person feel rejuvenated, restored, like
It's
you
even
said.
the back of the house. It's who's doing the
Yeah,
food shopping. Like when you go out, don't you live in Nashville?
I do. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, love Nashville. So much good food there, by the way. Wow.
Yep.
But even when you eat tomatoes in the salad, like how often I'm a salad person, but how often are the tomatoes tasty? Like not that
Yeah.
often. But you can tell the difference between an organic farmer's market bought tomato and just a nasty tomato that honestly no one wants to eat. And is the food good? Is it served at the right temperature? Do all the meals for your whole family come out at the same time? If you're with
Right.
your little kids, does the waiter in the back of the house know, okay, we have to bring the kids food first? So it's all this nuance of listening and being intuitive. And that actually at 11 Madison Park, Will Guidara, I got to interview him, the author of Unreasonable
Un-
Hospitality, the
yeah.
book. I said, what was your budget? Because the whole restaurant basically excelled through what we call surprise and delight,
Right.
doing these little things for every customer that came in, whether the customer was in New York, they didn't have a chance to get a hot dog at
Yes.
Yankee Stadium. They were
Yeah.
so bummed, or like a classic New York hot dog. So Will Guidara's team went out, got a hot dog on the street, cut it up, served it with some beautiful edible flowers and whatever else. They elevate it. And I asked him, what was your budget for stuff like that? Because that's like the way many of us think. And he said, I never had a budget, but I would get on the team about not spending enough. And that was just a whole mind explosion for me. Like, wow, can you imagine executives saying, I don't think we've spent enough on delighting our customers today. Like, you need to spend more.
Yeah. When I hear stories like that, like the hot dog story from Will Guidara, I think about the fact that it's empowering your employees and teaching and coaching your employees to focus beyond their role, to focus beyond their own little silo, and to literally pay attention to your customers, listen to your customers, and
Mhm.
observe your customers. And that's where you're going to find those opportunities to be able to surprise and delight.
Yeah.
If I recall the story correctly, I think the server overheard the table talking about the
Yeah.
fact that they didn't get a hot dog. Not that the server asked them, hey, have you had a chance to try hot dogs here? No? Okay.
Yeah. It's like being in a good relationship. Someone that really cares about you, remembers things that you've been through, knows what you're going through now. And that's just the building blocks of friendship, really, of relationships. But I actually just got back from Switzerland on Friday. I had the chance to speak to a hearing aid company, and
Oh,
I brought
wow.
with me a framework from my new book, The 8 Laws of Customer Focused Leadership, called
Yeah.
the WAYS framework. And it's really simple. And at this company, things are a little complicated, a little complex. And they appreciated that the framework was real simple, which is WAYS: walk a mile in the customer's shoes, ask for truth, say yes to accountability, and small improvements every day. And so you take a simple framework like what I've just shared, WAYS, and
Right.
you just begin to chip away at the pieces of your restaurant or customer experience that customers hate the most. Start there. And then things start to change, but you don't have to start over, because what we know is that customer experience is a game of inches rather than yards. You don't have to do a whole transformation and start over. You can just start small and work from there.
Well, that's it. So if you were talking to a leader, and I think, one of the things that you teach, one of your lessons is creating a 90-day plan for starting
Yeah.
your customer experience strategy. What should be in their 90-day plan? What are the best ways for them to get started with that?
This is so top of mind because I was in Zurich the other night. I went out with a client, and they were at the beginning in a way, and they're like, "Where do we even start, Blake?" And I said, "Just start with a customer advisory board, like talk to customers." Because I had heard that the company was doing focus groups, but not with their core customers, maybe with just other customers that had the similar product. So the
Ah,
first was so basic. In the first 90 days, you've got to listen. I recommend a listening tour, which a lot of chief customer officers tell you they'll start with. Listen, listen, listen. What are the other business groups challenged with? What are customers challenged with? What are employees challenged with? But one of the ways to do that is with a customer advisory board. And also, who knows your customer better than the frontline who are serving
yes,
customers directly? Like, imagine
exactly.
FedEx, where you worked, the people delivering the packages. They could probably tell you 10 things that would make the customer experience more efficient and better.
That's
So
it.
I would
Yeah.
just start with listening and then creating boards where you just literally talk to people.
I am so grateful to hear you say all that, especially the customer advisory board, but also the front line. I see this problem too many times where you'll see the C suite, senior leadership, they'll go off on their own retreat and they'll design customer experience all around their own assumptions
Yeah.
without talking to customers, without listening to customers or observing customers, and without talking to the front line, which, like you said to me, the front line is going to be where you get some of your best ideas on how to solve customer problems because they're the ones that see it and observe it. They're also the ones that are usually the brunt of customer complaints.
One of the best examples I recently was reminded of was T-Mobile and John Legere. He in 2012 stood on the stage at CES and said,
Okay.
the cell phone industry, the wireless industry is garbage. And they were the
Yeah.
fourth spot in the big four, T-Mobile at the time. He
Oh,
said,
wow. Yeah.
basically, this whole industry treats customers like garbage. We're going to create something called the uncarrier strategy. We're going to be different. We're going to stop charging customers all these hidden fees. We're going to make it easy to get out of a contract. We're not going to charge international roaming. We're going to create a loyalty program. And John Legere himself embodied this transformation of T-Mobile, the brand. He had long hair. He would wear
Yeah.
magenta and leather jackets. Like, if you see what he looked like before, like, he looked like a complete corporate square. And he turned himself into what he felt the brand should embody, which is more of like a punk rocker that would drive a Harley. And it's just so funny to see the change in his looks. He also spent so much time out on the front lines. He would go to contact centers and take selfies with hundreds and
Oh,
hundreds of employees. He did slow cooker Sundays where he would go live when Facebook was like the major video streaming platform, and he would
Yeah.
slow cook a meal and just talk about what was happening with T-Mobile. So he did all these things as a leader to embody the customer experience mindset. And T-Mobile really gained so much market share and actually became one of the top companies, just destroying it on Wall Street. The stock went way up in his tenure, and it's just really a customer experience fairy tale. So I think T-Mobile and John Legere, it really is a leadership example of how you can transform a company with that customer experience mindset.
That's a great example of the leader doing that and the leader communicating it and even modeling the way. At the same time, it can't just fall on the leader's shoulders to do that. I mean, everybody has to get on board. So how do you think leaders can help instill or get their own employees to instill that customer experience mindset?
I think it starts with time and focus. I recently was with a client, and they really felt like the leaders were happy, the front line was happy, but the middle management were not happy because they were really overworked. I used to work at Intel, the chip maker, and I remember it was very stressful for managers that had a team of 10 and were also required to produce. And I
Yeah.
think this is really a challenge for culture because you're asking leaders to be coaches. And I've never seen a time where we need more coaches because of mental health and the chaos in the world.
Right.
The managers don't have time to be coaches because they're so overworked and overstressed. So if you can remove some of the stress and weight off their back, they're going to be able to spend more time creating that really rich culture that is necessary and have time to really coach. But if your managers are so inundated with producing and managing, you're not going to be able to achieve those results.
Man, I am really glad that you shared that. I've had similar conversations with people around how to instill the mindset into all employees. And I don't think anyone's really touched on that subject of the value of middle management, but the fact that middle management can't really do that the way that most of them are hindered today. So that makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, if you just look at your own life, sometimes do you ever just remove things that you just really didn't want to be doing? And you're like, oh, I can breathe. Wow. I didn't even know life could feel this not stressful, just taking out that thing that I just didn't want to do and I wasn't even good at. You have to be able to do that for your managers too. You have to be able to see for them what is on their plate that is just shouldn't be on their plate. That's it. Just removing stress and removing just workload can really free them up to be coaches and leaders.
One of the things that I teach about, whether it's the customer journey or the employee journey, is at every interaction, at every point, you are either helping them or you're hindering them. And when it comes to middle management, what can you do to remove all the things that are hindering them from their role? If you want your middle managers, if you want middle management to be able to play the role of coach and to coach your employees to have a customer experience mindset, think through all the things that are hindering that process and just remove them.
I think a good manager will do that even if it feels painful at first, because sometimes people are competitive. Like they either want everything or maybe they don't want to do something, and forcing them to do something that's good for them, it can be painful, but you have to be willing to do that.
Yeah. One other thing that I want to talk about that you talk about as one of your laws is anticipating the future, being
Yeah.
a futurist. So you're a customer experience futurist, and we want all our leaders to be customer experience futurists. So how can we help leaders become customer experience futurists and know how to anticipate customers' needs?
In the book, I have some frameworks that I recommend for horizon scanning and doing the workshopping of it.
Nice.
But really, it's very simple. Success depends on being able to hold two opposing ideas in your mind at one time, which means how can I take care of everything on my plate today while also planting seeds for tomorrow? Where do we want to be in 1 year's time, 5 years' time, maybe even 10 years' time? Because we can't grow unless we're taking care of everything that's in front of us, but also thinking, where do we want to end up? And that is the mistake that most companies, they just can't do it. Most companies are treading water, just worrying about quarterly profits and not thinking about the long-term direction of the company. And with the commoditization of all of our products, every company today needs to think about the experience around the product. And I actually did a workshop last week where I asked the leaders, if you couldn't sell your main product, but you had to only sell the experience around the product, what would that be? And it was really interesting to hear what they came up with. But again, it's just the ability to hold two opposing ideas in your mind at one time, which is today and tomorrow. And that's where most companies just fail.
Well, so in that workshop, are you able to share maybe a couple of examples of what they came up with? Because it's a fascinating question. I love that.
Yeah. So their product is something you usually buy in a store. It's mostly directed at older people. They were inspired by Heidi Lao, which is a Chinese restaurant chain that is very experiential. It's hot pot. You ever had hot pot soup?
Yeah.
But Heidi Lao, it's a 118,000 person company most people have never heard of, with a $14 billion market cap that has customer centricity in their bones. So when you come in for hot pot, they'll polish your shoes, they'll clean your glasses, they'll give you a hand massage. The waiters dance with the noodles. You might be serenaded by a Chinese opera singer. The waiters, if you say the right secret word, will all do a synchronized dance for you. So it's very much an experience. And it's actually not really about the soup. It's about the whole immersive experience when you enter the restaurant. And so they were inspired by that story that I shared. They were thinking, well, what is it that an older person would want other than the product? Like maybe they need their shoes shined. Maybe they want to chit chat. So more like services. Maybe they want a hand massage. Some people wouldn't want that, but so that was one example. There were other examples of just maybe bringing the product, just coming to the home, because it's all about the demographic. If your customer is 72, there's other things they're going through in their life that you could probably help with because they are an underserved demographic. It was interesting to hear what they came up with. And that's just one example, but I think it's good for all of your listeners to think about too. Even for you and me, like if we couldn't sell our core speaking product or consulting, what would we do? It's something most of us don't think about.
Well, and to me, that speaks to the fact that so much of the time, because you mentioned this earlier, so much of the time, most everything really has become commoditized. It's not really about the product that you sell. It's all about the experience that comes with that.
Yeah. Most products have been done 10 times over.
Yeah. Yeah. And really, the brands that are winning are the ones that have recognized that products have been done, products have been commoditized. And now here is how we stand out with the experience that we're delivering to our customers.
Yeah. And I think most companies are just not organized or set up to compete with customer experience. So many companies just don't share data across the business. Their KPIs are not set up to embrace customer experience. They don't talk to customers enough. They throw Net Promoter Score up just as a checking the box.
Yeah.
And they just don't want to get their head out of the sand because it just feels like too much work. But that's why I say just start small. Just start with something. And then you'll begin to create a more customer-centric company.
Yeah. You'll start to see that momentum. And then people will start to ask, how did you get to that? Where'd that success come from? Well, we took a customer-focused mindset and here's what we did. And then others will say, we want to take a customer-focused mindset too.
Absolutely. It's like contagious. Absolutely.
Well, last question for you. And we talked about this early towards the beginning, but we're both parents. I'm curious if any of your customer-focused leader laws apply to parents and how parents can manage and develop their kids.
Yeah, I mean, the first one that comes to mind is just the first one, which is the customer experience mindset. So if you're a parent, you are living a life of service, whether you feel like it or not. There are no sick days. You need to show up, rain or shine, for your kids that need you. And there's so many aspects of leadership and customer experience that I think are just beautifully relevant to being a parent. A lot of the things that I think a good parent does are counterintuitive. The whole put your mask on yourself first and then put the mask on your kids.
Right.
It seems terrible, but I think when people have kids, they lose themselves. it sounds dramatic, but if you want to fight to remain the person that you were before you had kids, it does feel sometimes like a fight. Every day I do a lot of mental health stuff. I exercise and I'm swimming in cold water and I meditate. And that takes a lot of time that I really don't have, but I make it because I know that if I feel good about myself and I feel mentally clear and happy, my kids are going to benefit. But most parents, like, there's no time to exercise when you have kids. They wake up, they need you. So you have to figure out how to do that. I think who you choose as a partner is so important. So it's not just self-development and growth for yourself while also taking care of your employees. It's who's in the business with you? Like, who's running the business with you? Are they toxic? Do they pull you up and help you out? And I'm so blessed that actually I met my husband in 2010 at a customer relationship management conference. He's not in the space anymore, but he kind of taught me how to be a speaker. My husband taught me how to be as successful as him. And a lot of partners, if they have a bad year and their wife has a good year, like they're out. Like that's not okay. And he's always supported me. He like gets me opportunities. He smiles when I win. And to be honest, for a working mom that has started to have some success, it's everything. And I think you need to make sure your partner is on your team and together. I mean, if you're not aligned closely, the family is going to suffer. It's kind of like being with the customer experience mindset, like you said about the restaurant, like listening. Is your partner having a bad day? Do you need to let something go? Sometimes partners can be garbagey and you need to just let them be garbagey. And like, I'll be in a bad mood or he's in a bad mood. Just like close an eye to it. Like with your customers, your employees, sometimes people act bad and you need to like let it go. There's just so many parallels between being a good parent, a good partner, spouse, and a good business person, and just like a good person in general that has high ethics and values.
Oh, yeah. Well, and to hear you talk about it that way, especially like as it relates to the amount of self-care that you need to have in order to be a better parent, the amount of focus you need to be placing on your spouse, your partner, I think that also ties back to what we were talking about earlier about having that long-term focus. So you can have a focus on the short term and just be really reactionary in the moment. Every day you're just going to react to something. Or you can have more of a focus on the long term. If I want my marriage to survive and thrive long term, here's what I need to do. If I want my children to develop into thriving adults, here's what I need to do with that long-term mindset. I love that.
And it is so hard, Matt. It is so hard.
I know.
There are times when, like I don't feel like being the bigger person. I'm not in the mood, but I know that the conversation is getting heated and I don't want our kids hearing us argue and I have to stay calm so they don't notice the tone of my voice when I say like, hey, we're going to talk about this later. When I feel like saying, I'm so like, what's wrong with you? Like, that's what I feel like saying. Instead, I have to put on my adult hat and go, let's be calm in this heated moment and not be emotional and be rational. And you don't always feel like it, but you can really afford to have a sick day in life as a parent, as a leader. You've got to constantly hold yourself to a high standard. That's why customer-focused leaders and businesses are more successful because frankly, they just work harder. That's it.
Well, and then to tie back to something else we talked about earlier is like, I don't know about you, you probably don't ever fail at your relationship with your spouse or being a parent. I do.
Are you kidding?
I fail sometimes. And I think even this morning, like with my oldest son, but what I do is when I recognize that I fail, when I recognize that I reacted in a way when I shouldn't have, I apologize. I come back and I say, you know what? I should not have done that. I apologize. Here's what I'm going to do in the future.
And I also think that is really interesting because, Matt, your kids can see you even have like a little bit of a disagreement with your spouse, but see how you go, not yelling, but disagreeing, figuring it out, giving your kids those tools too, and not trying to always hide everything or brush everything under the rug, like seeing you fail and then how you communicate and come to an agreement. I think is really powerful so that I remember that when I feel like, oh, like the kids saw this or saw that, or I failed. It's like, oh, I'm actually giving them tools because things go wrong and they're going to have tools too to calmly figure it out.
That's it. That's it. Well, so all that to say, having a customer-focused mindset isn't just for your business. It's for every aspect of life.
Yeah. And it's not about being perfect because perfect is not attainable. It's just not.
Yep.
So do your best every day and use the tools. The tools work. That's how I remember. If I'm in a bad mood, I'm like, okay, did I meditate? Did I exercise? Did I swim in a cold pool or do something cold? Usually if I'm in a bad mood, the answer is no. So I remember hearing a podcast recently where it's like, if you basically work on yourself, you can't be bummed out or depressed. Because when you work on yourself, like you're working so hard to feel good. And to me, that's always the answer is work on yourself. That's it. That's all you can do.
That's it. Yeah. And it's learning and growing too, all the time. Oh, wow. Well, I could talk forever about this. I could talk forever about having a customer focused mindset and applying it in all aspects everywhere.
It's the best question anyone's ever asked me. Thank you.
My pleasure. A little bit of a secret. A lot of times the questions that I ask, I'm asking them because I'm trying to get coaching for myself.
Of course. And it's more fun. Like, I think podcasts where you don't just talk about straight business. I mean, all of us are trying to find answers. And every day you start over. That's why I do Peloton. I love some of the teachers on there because they're like, every day is game day.
That's
every
right.
day. They even talk about they have to start over. Like every workout they do is they have to start from scratch. And so you're never done. And same with customer experience. Someone asked me last week in the workshop, like, when are we done? And it's like, no, this is a wash, rinse, repeat situation. You're never done. You just have to do the work every day. As soon as you stop doing the work, everything goes to hell.
Yeah.
You have to put it in.
Yeah. So, because customer expectations are never going to get to an end point. Customer expectations are always, they're dynamic. They're always evolving. And so you've always got to be working to be able to meet and exceed them. As it relates to simple experiences, I like to say simple never stops.
And there's such a need for that in the corporate world because everything is so complicated. So I love your brand.
Thank you. Well, I am so appreciative of you being here. I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from your podcast, from your other books, learning from 8 Laws of Customer-Focused Leadership. But where can people go to learn more from you?
Yeah, you reach out on 8cxlaws.com, which is the book website, or it's very easy to find me. Blake Morgan, BlakeMichelleMorgan.com. I'm not the musician. I'm the speaker. So thanks so much for interviewing me. I love doing this show. I think your questions were some of the better questions I've ever had. And please don't hesitate to reach out. Please stay in touch.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here, Blake. I hope you enjoyed my discussion with Blake Morgan. You can learn more from her at BlakeMichelleMorgan.com. And be sure to grab your copy of The 8 Laws of Customer-Focused Leadership. It just released this month. You can go check it out at 8cxlaws.com. And if you're enjoying the Simple Brand podcast, go ahead and hit the subscribe button because it's going to make it so much simpler for you to get future episodes like the next one featuring Ben Gutman. We'll be discussing lessons from his book, Simply Put, Why Clear Messages Win and How to Design Them. I mean, by the title alone, I'm sure you can tell that this one is a solid match for Simple Brand. So go ahead and subscribe. You'll automatically get Ben's episode as soon as it's live. Until then, keep it simple.